Chapter 8. The Temple of Art. In his entire life, Marvin had never been outside the Pompadays' apartment. To be fair, he had crawled onto James's window ledge once or twice. On an unexpectedly warm day in December, the Pompadays' cleaning woman had opened a few windows to let the mild air swirl through the winter-stale rooms, and Marvin had climbed eagerly onto the sill, scanning the distant sky above and the narrow, bustling street below. For all the information he gleaned from the Pompadays' television shows, the world beyond the apartment still seemed vast and unknowable. Marvin couldn't believe that here he was, tucked in James's jacket, venturing out into the city. He held on to the nylon pocket with only his head protruding. The crisp February chill stung his shell, and the sidewalk rocked along below at an astonishing speed. Pedestrians loomed in front of him and quickly passed. Cars roared by, then squealed to a stop, horns blaring. Everything seemed too large, too loud, and too strange. Marvin knew there must be beetles living out here, too. He knew his own family had relations in Gramercy Park. He couldn't help but wonder how they managed in a world that changed so quickly every minute. The city was full of danger and life. Marvin felt dizzy with excitement. As he jostled along in James's pocket, he remembered the story of Aunt Cecile, the traveler of the family, known for her wanderlust. One summer day, she'd absconded from the kitchen with a used tea bag, opened one end to meticulously empty the contents of the pouch, and then used it as a parachute, and leapt from the living room window, holding fast to the string. The beetles had watched her drift gamely down to earth, a tiny floating speck. She disappeared when she reached the sidewalk and was never seen again. Marvin thought of her out here somewhere in the huge, hurrying world. Did she regret her boldness, or had it been the first essential step, opening her life to new, unprecedented adventures? "Is that it?" James asked, pointing to the enormous grayish-white edifice that rose before them. "Yep, that's the Met," his father told him. "You've been here before, remember? Though I mostly take you to the Museum of Modern Art." Marvin could see large, colorful banners with writing on them hanging high across the front of the building. He had no idea what they said. As easy as it was to understand human speech and even to eventually figure out the concept of human time, it had proven nearly impossible for the beetles to decode their writing. A written language was something the beetles had no use for among themselves. But Marvin now realized just how helpful it could be. Why, if he knew how to write in James's language, just imagine all the interesting, important things he could tell him. They climbed the long sweep of stone steps, two at a time, with James cupping one hand protectively over his pocket. Soon they were in the cavernous main hall of the building. James peered around at the crowds of people in their dark winter coats, the large, elegant vases of flowers, and the wide stairs leading to the second floor. "It's this way," Carl called, leading them up the central staircase with long strides. Two vaulted hallways stretched on either side with glass cases that held colorful displays of porcelain bowls and platters. Soft yellow light shrouded the open space. "I remember this place now," James said. "It kind of feels like a church." His father smiled. "Well, it kind of is a church. It's kind of a temple of art." Marvin glimpsed marble statues and gilt-framed paintings. Moments later, they walked into a large room, its walls lined with drawings. "Wow," James stared at it all. "Look at all this stuff." His father took his hand and pulled him along. "I think the Dürer paintings are in the third room." Marvin was too far from the walls and too jostled by his jacket perch to see well, but he could make out a blur of sketches, mostly portraits and figures, every now and then a landscape. The colors were muted, blacks, grays, browns, a faint wash of red. As soon as James stopped walking, Marvin tried to climb farther out of his pocket to get a better view. James kept sneaking small, worried glances in his direction. "Here," his father said finally. "Look at that, will you? Do you see what I mean?" They came to a stop. By now, Marvin had four legs outside the pocket flap and was balancing precariously on its edge, hoping for a better look. As he teetered there in frustration, James's finger appeared alongside him. He hesitated, then climbed aboard. James raised his hand to his shoulder, where Marvin quickly disembarked and hid beneath the edge of James's collar. "Wow," said James again. The drawing hanging in front of them was a small, precise image of a courtyard. The lines were impossibly thin and exact, from the casements of the windows to the stones in the square, meticulously contoured. The slate rooftops had edges as sharp as cut glass. Marvin stared at it. He could almost see the hand of the artist executing each line. The longer he stared, the more he could feel the drawing come into being. Carl looked around at the other museum goers, who obliviously walked past them. He set the math book on the floor and carefully removed Marvin's drawing from inside the cover, holding it up and turning to James. "Do you see? Your technique, it's so similar to Dürer's." James nodded, speechless. Slowly they moved along the wall of drawings, stopping to study each one. There were other small landscapes, pictures of an old woman and a girl, a pen and ink drawing of a rabbit. They were almost photographic in their details, yet startlingly distinct. The faces looked like real people, Marvin thought, with the ruggedness of their noses and chins, expressions full of feeling. Near the end of the wall, James stopped. "Look at this one, Dad. It's so little. What's this one supposed to be?" Marvin crept out from under James's collar. The drawing was a tiny framed miniature of a gowned woman kneeling, with her arms around an animal. It was a lion. She had waves of hair that cascaded down her back, and the lion's mane flowed in similar waves over its massive shoulders. Carl read the plaque. "It says it's one of the 4 cardinal virtues. Fortitude. Do you know what that means?" "Nope," said James. "It means courage, strength." "Is she trying to catch the lion?" "Well, sort of wrestling with it, I think. Look at the detail, though. Look at the folds of her dress and the lion's claws. Dürer's hand is so precise. That's what's made me think of your drawing, James." Carl squeezed James's shoulder. "I could do that," thought Marvin. He was riveted. "Carl?" They all turned at the voice. Emerging from the loose clusters of people in the gallery was one rumpled-looking older man, walking directly toward them and smiling warmly. "I thought that was you." And that's the end of the chapter. Here's a picture of them looking at one of the Dürer pictures. Fortitude, one of 4 cardinal virtues. What do you think the other 3 are? You'll have to come back and listen another day to find out.